episode number 194 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. So if you've been relying completely on OPKs, which are ovulation predicting kits, to figure out when you're ovulating and when the best time it is to get pregnant, then this episode is for you, because I am going to go over why OPKs are not the best ways to confirm ovulation. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist, here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. So first I want to start by talking about what OPKs are. So basically OPKs, ovulation predicting kits, are kits that you can find. They basically come as sticks that you can pee on. And what they track and what they test for really, or look for, are luteinizing hormone. So luteinizing hormone is a hormone that is secreted from the pituitary gland of your brain. And basically what it does is it signals the ovaries to ovulate. So ultimately it is the start. It's pretty much the start of getting things to move in the directions of ovulation. And what that means is that, yes, we know that the brain is trying to signal. So the brain is trying, but that does not necessarily confirm that ovulation happened or that the ovaries responded and an egg was released from the follicle. So that's just something to understand, because I think when we rely on that, we see that positive line, then we think, okay, then that means that I'm ovulating. Yes. If you are ovulating, it does give you a time frame to go on. So it actually lets you know approximately when things are going to happen. So when it's at its peak and you do see that line, within 36 hours after is when you should be actually ovulating. But that is relying on the idea that you really are responding, or the ovaries are really responding to the luteinizing hormones, the LH. So in order to really track that, you'd have to try a couple of different methods. My go-to, and I think that this is one of the best things that you can do, is taking or tracking your basal body temperature. It's the best way, in my opinion, because it also allows you to see if your temperature is at a good point. That can actually, because if the temperature is too low, you may want to look into like possible thyroid issues. Chinese medicine, I would work on increasing the yang energy, which is the heating energy of the body. So it also helps for providing practitioners, especially people like me who do acupuncture. It really gives me a lot of insight as to what is going on. And a lot of times you can use herbs or certain foods to bring up your temperature in the body. We also do something called moxibustion, which is burning a certain type of herb to increase the heat, because we don't want the body to be too cool. It's really important to be at a certain temperature in order to support fertility and to support conception. So the way to track your basal body temperature is ideally using a basal body thermometer, and they come digitally now. And what you do is, there's a couple of things that a couple of rules really to keep in mind. Is number one, if you're sleeping at least 3 hours of consecutive sleep, so if you get up in the middle of the night to pee, make sure that it's at least 3 consecutive hours that you're sleeping before you wake up in the morning. And put the thermometer next to you so that you're able to reach it in the morning, because you want to put it in your mouth before you get out of bed. So that makes a huge difference on the temperature. As soon as you get out of bed, as soon as your feet hit the floor, your temperature changes. So it's important to put the thermometer in your mouth, and ideally put it in your mouth before turning it on. So it's a digital thermometer. You have a button that you press to turn it on. Ideally, you put the temperature, the thermometer, in your mouth before turning it on. So if you could do it from anywhere from 5 to even 10 minutes, that would be ideal because it's going to give you a more accurate read. So putting it in there, allowing your mouth to warm up the tip of the thermometer and then turning it on will give you a much better read. So once you get that information, you can either print out a lot of times, you can find online graphs or charts where you can put it in writing. Some people like paper, or you can use an app. So Kindara is a really good one that I like. And there are many other apps that actually allow for you to track your temperature every day and how you're feeling and other things as well. So writing down every single day or putting it in the app, what your temperature is, it will eventually create a chart for you. And then you can look at the chart to see what it looks like. So ultimately, what that should look like is considering the first day of the flow bleed. So not spotting, but flow blood. Like when you're actually bleeding is considered the first day of your menstrual cycle. So that is considered day 1. Day 1 is your first day of a bleed, not spotting, but like a real bleed. So considering that to be day 1, typically day 1 to approximately the middle of your cycle, and that could be like around day 12 to 14, depending on your cycle, everybody's different, is the follicular cycle or phase of your menstrual cycle. So follicular phase is the day of your first bleed until the day of your ovulation. That should be around 97 degrees. So you'll see 97.2, 97.5, and it'll just kind of, the point will go back and forth, but it should be 97 or higher. If it's 96, I would personally consider it too low of a temperature. So 97 or higher. And then what happens is it may dip really quickly and then go up after ovulation, and it should stay around 98s. So typically you'll see in the luteal phase is considered the day of ovulation up until the day of your next bleed. So follicular phase, day of your bleed up until ovulation. Luteal phase, ovulation to the first day of your next bleed, or hopefully pregnancy if you're trying to conceive. And ultimately, you should be at 98s in the luteal phase. And when you see that you're in the 98s, then you know that you ovulated, because progesterone, which is a hormone that is made by the remains of the follicle. So during ovulation, you have a follicle, and the follicle is basically an egg surrounded by fluid and another membrane. So during ovulation, that egg is released from the follicle, and whatever's remaining from the follicle is called the corpus luteum, and that will secrete progesterone for really the first trimester if a person conceives, and then the placenta takes over and starts producing progesterone. So progesterone is really important, and you want to know that your body has enough of it. And progesterone will induce a heating effect in the body and will keep you around 98 degrees. So it is gold standard way of really seeing if your body is ovulating, if you're ovulating correctly. And that is the number one most ideal way that I would suggest for people to figure that out, is by doing that. Some people don't love taking their temperature. They think it's another pain, and then sometimes it stresses them out. And totally understandable. I still suggest do it for 1 or 2 months. Why not? It's just, if you know that it's temporary, it may not feel as stressful, and you know that it's not going to be forever. Just do it for 1 or 2 months. and just to see what's going on and to get a good baseline on what your temperature is like, what your body's doing, the rhythms. Now, keep in mind that if you are taking thyroid medication or have any issues with the thyroid, it could impact the temperature and it could change things because the thyroid medication does change your temperature. So if that is the case, know that it's probably from the thyroid medication changing it. However, it's still going to have that same general impact and you are going to see that increase. And if you want another method that might be easier, there are certain tests that will check for progesterone metabolites that come in your urine, and it'll happen after you ovulate. So more likely like day 19, 20, 21, depending on your cycle. And the companies that I've seen that have that are Proov or UVA. And you can also buy, on a side note, something that is easier to track your temperature, but it tracks skin temperature, but it still works. And it will also allow you to see what your fertility window is. And you can use things like TempTrap or the Ava bracelet. So there are other ways. And also Mira Fertility, that's another one that will check your urine samples. A Dutch test for one of the cycles can also show or prove that your progesterone did actually, or that you did actually ovulate, because it will check for progesterone, and it also checks for other hormones as well. I offer Dutch testing myself for both my online clients and in-person patients. So it is something that I do offer. If you ever want to check it out, you can go to my website, thewholesomelotus.com, which is more my fertility clinic website, or michelleorbitz.com, either one. And the Dutch test is really great and just seeing so much more than just ovulation, but it really shows you how your body is processing things like melatonin, waking cortisol, and how you're processing estrogen. And so it's actually a really great test to, as a baseline again, to see what's going on. And we'll also be able to help with deciding what supplements to take to support your cycle. So ultimately, unless you know for sure that you are definitely ovulating, you've confirmed it a couple of times, you can use the OPKs just to get an idea of where you're at. Because if you already know you're ovulating, it will give you a little bit more of an idea on your window. And when it does show positive, you know around that time you're about within a 36-hour window from when you're going to actually ovulate. So it's good to know as far as timing for when to try to conceive. Generally speaking, the best times to conceive or start conceiving is, or start trying to conceive, is 5 days before ovulation. When you start to see that you have consistency in your cycle, which is something that you can see when tracking your cycle, then you'll start to understand a little bit better, and you realize that like the apps, all they do is put in some kind of algorithm that estimates that time, but you don't know for sure if that is really the time. And the best way to confirm is just what I've been mentioning before, the different methods to really, really know if that's your absolute time. And over time, many people do tend to have a rhythm. Some people are irregular. In that case, I would definitely suggest charting and really looking into your temperature, because then you can get more of an idea of what's going on. But also, I would even suggest doing like things like TempDrop and the Ava bracelet to let you know when that window starts to open up, so that you have more of an idea, because it is hard to figure out if you're irregular, and every month looks different. One thing that you want to check, and you definitely want to make sure, is that your luteal phase is long enough to allow for pregnancy. And one of the things that can cause issues with that is low progesterone in general. And there are many different things that you can do, but it's important to speak to somebody who understands this and understands what to look for, and can suggest certain supplements that can support a longer luteal phase. And sometimes you might have to supplement with progesterone, but I would not suggest to do that on your own. It's important to make sure that you're actually testing for it and know that you're low on progesterone. But sometimes something as simple as taking some bioidentical progesterone can actually help get you over that hump and help a woman conceive. So sometimes it's something as simple as that, but it's really important to know how to observe your body and how to understand your actual rhythms so that you are able to optimize your ability to conceive. So I hope that was helpful. I know that a lot of people rely on OPKs, and that's why it was important for me to have an episode speaking about that and bringing that to light. Keep in mind, and I've had a lot of people reach out and ask me this, that I don't just work in person as an acupuncturist. I actually do online fertility coaching utilizing a lot of the testing and also the information that I do in person, including acupressure for somebody who's not able to get an acupuncturist. But I do work with people online. So if you are interested in working with me, you can go ahead and find me at www.michelleorovitz.com. And thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope you have a beautiful day.